Let's take you now to this live. The Tourism Minister, Mmamoloko Kubayi-Ngubane, giving us the latest in this sector. Let's take you there live.
And how we are going to react to it, it wasn't clear. I must say the process of this recovery plan took longer than we anticipated initially. Those who have been involved, who have attended the webinars that were led by the CEO, I joined some, the discussions and inputs, the written comments. We started last year. And as we started working, it was evident that we couldn't rush through or finish ours before the country's economic reconstruction and recovery plan was concluded. So we had to wait and see what comes out of that so that there's serious alignment and we can be able to see that alignment between ourselves and as a sector and what we are doing. Largely, you would find that in the recovery plan, there will be things that largely will be driven by government, but we do believe that this is a partnership. For us to receive or to see the recovery of the tourism sector, it's going to be evident that all of us have to work together, both as public and private. As we have learned how to work together during the COVID pandemic in terms of engagements, as we were doing the regulations, the directions, getting feedback, consulting on things that needs to be done, we do believe that the implementation of the tourism sector recovery plan would largely depend, its success will depend on all of us working together to be able to achieve what we need to achieve. Maybe if we can get that presentation back. So I don't have much. I decided not to have a speech, but take you through what we believe would be our sort of get you to understand. So we'll do just a bit of introduction, the context where we are currently. As you go into the document, you'd realize that the context of it and the background would give you broadly what we have. We'll talk about emerging travel and tourism trends, alignment of the plan to the economic reconstruction and recovery plan, strategic approach, the pillars where we're talking about the protection and rejuvenation of the supply, the reigniting of the demand and strengthening enabling capabilities, enablers and the implementation. And we'll do some level of, I hope you've got the right one, at the end, justification why we have to do this. Now, we would all remember that COVID-19, as I said, has had a huge impact on the economy, but also to the tourism sector in particular. Now, when this process was initiated, it was in that context. It was last year we started the process to say, we can't fold our arms. Globally, everybody is looking at the recovery of both the economy and especially tourism because it's hard hit. And we needed to put something together that would help us to say, what are the things that we're going to have to do as a tourism portfolio, as a tourism sector to be able to achieve our recovery, and so that the recovery is not thought to be an automatic thing or it will happen out of an osmosis, but it's something that can happen and it has to be deliberately driven. This plan was published in 2020, August, for comments, and we received quite substantive comments and we worked through them. So if general public would not find what they have written as comments, you'd know the process of public consultation. It's based on the rationale of what you have submitted. It's based on the support of what you have submitted from other people as well. So we've looked at that, but quite substantively, the inputs that were received at that time were even about the regulations more. And I think at August, people were still wanting to see the international borders opened and all that. So largely, the submissions that we had received, because we've gone through all of them, were about opening of the borders and all that, and like lessening of the restrictions. But some were on what needs to be as a long term in terms of sustaining the tourism space. Now, when you look at the context, we just saw Statistics South Africa releasing stats this week that showed us year on year in terms of statistics where we are sitting. And you'd see that total income of the food and beverage industry from January 2020 to December 2020 decreased by 40.5 compared to January to December 2019. And this is expected because at that time, if you count large number of the months in that year, you'd note that it was during hardcore lockdown. Measured in nominal terms, current prices, total income for the tourist accommodation industry decreased by 72.7% in February 2021 compared to February 2020. Still, these are annual statistics that reflects where we were in 2020 in terms of the year where we were hit by COVID and large number of restrictions. Limitation on gathering has brought the MICE sector to a grinding halt. You can see ordinarily the MICE sector, we are at Sandton Convention Center. Those of us who have been here many times would understand that over the years this place would be buzzing of activities, events. And the fact that we see this limited or almost zero activities that are happening tells you to the reality of what is happening in that space as the subsector of MICE. The association of COVID-19 variant with our country has had a negative impact on the country's brand. And many of us would have seen what has come out of US yesterday, where they've now put us on the red list. US was one of the countries that we could still get a lot of tourists. We know that Europe had put us to say if somebody comes from South Africa, when they get home, then they quarantine. And we're seeing now more and more countries that are literally putting us on a red list, specifically because of the variant. And we're doing a lot of work around that to try and understand what are their reasons, and we'll deal with that in terms of where we are, and you have possibly started to see the engagement we have in global space. Vaccination will be the major determinant of how quickly we recover. Not only vaccination in the country, but vaccination globally, because and the issue of the vaccination against the variant, I shouldn't call it South African variant, because we are fighting to not to have it called variant, but the feedback as well I was giving to the scientists is that they should have given us an easy name so that people can remember, because most of the feedback is that this name is difficult, 501.Y2 is difficult to remember and for people to call. If it was just a word, it would have been easy and would be remembered easily. The sector is potentially facing numerous stop and start cycles as restrictions change in line with the evaluation or the evolution of the pandemic. Now, we know we've learned over last year to say it's going to be a start and stop. We don't have a closure once and opening once. As the restriction based on risk-adjusted strategy, that's what happens. Now, emerging travel and tourism trends, this we would pick up based on our engagement at WTTC, our engagement at UNWTO, my involvement in the WEF work that we are doing as a global council. We've been doing quite a lot of work. I mean, last week we had a meeting, for example, I had to join in terms of South African time was 1 a.m. But I couldn't even stay off because part of what we were looking at is these trends that are coming and what countries are doing and discussions around those. So it does tell you the traveling of the future and the current, what are the trends, future tourism travels, what's happening. So the demand of unique, sustainable and exclusive experience will rise. Travelers of overseas holidays will insist on refund guarantees. And this, a lot of our sectors can talk to, because most of them would say to us, and this is where our complaints officers are finding. For example, somebody will book a wedding, and then restrictions comes. This is what we saw over festive season. And when the gatherings were stopped, people wanted refunds. So as part of the work that we have to do with the private sector, especially those who are establishment owners, is that you've got to start working around the guarantees of refunds and the conditions. The previous conditions might not work in the current environment and going forward. And people will demand to have these clauses now in as they book their traveling. Travelers want the flexibility of change of dates and destination. that we are seeing as well. It's the new trend that is there. The demand for open spaces or rural holidays and outdoor activities will rise to avoid congestion. So when you look, for example, in terms of the stats that we just received out of Easter holiday and the trends that we're looking, it's not officially stats from Stats SA, but internal government work that we have been doing in NCCC as well to analyze what we are seeing. We are seeing that, for example, during the Easter holiday, we were able to have a lot of people going to your rural type of provinces, your bushes, your urban, but your urban areas like your Sandton area, your Cape Town, continue to suffer. So that's what we are seeing as a trend going forward. Whether it will be sustained like that, we'll continue to do analysis and to be able to understand if that's what is going to happen. Then road travels as opposed to air travel appears to be the preferred mode of holiday travelers. Now this is what as well the aviation industry has to start looking into and responding to. Because a lot people are starting to feel a bit, are raising concerns about being in a flight, clustered and all that. Are they able to space? What is it? Versus their operational cost. We do understand that viability of flights and all those things in terms of giving the space. But are we able to continue to guarantee people that you would fly and you'll fly safely? I've been flying and I've been feeling safely. But not every traveler is feeling that way. So in terms of even your domestic market, what we are seeing as a trend is this road trips that are increasing now. More like, or even those who are coming, others are coming in and then driving, wanting to drive. More likelihood for avoidance of busy destinations, avoiding clustered and the risk of being infected just by nature of a lot of people there. Technology will be at the forefront of addressing consumer need. An example is contactless technology which can be used to address health and safety concerns. So some of the people are starting to ask whether at the reception area, do you have contact, can you check yourself in and all those things. You'd have noted last week, we launched a hotel in Cape Town. And part of one of the things that they threw to me as a challenge was that our grading system still does not take care of the technology part. So some of our requirements and all those things, so they are saying to us, you need to adapt as well as tourism department and the sector to be able, and government to be able to be responsive to what is needed in terms of technology, innovation and all that. Now, just to speak to the alignment, we have made sure that because what the ERRP, Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan, speaks to, it has amongst the priority areas tourism as part of the recovery. So there's mandate of what we need to do in terms of the ERRP on the tourism recovery sector. So that we have made sure that we align and it's identified as the priorities, and that's where we've aligned in terms of reigniting demand, because it speaks to domestic marketing, it speaks to marketing globally, it speaks to investment opportunities that needs to be there, and the support of infrastructure, which is the supply side. And that's where you would see the issue of the Tourism Equity Fund as linked to the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan being featured, because it's part of what you need to ignite in terms of supply side and supporting. So that we've made sure that we are able to do. We contribute in terms of the ERRP in the areas of infrastructure development, mass public employment, greater green economy intervention, the inclusion of women, youth and skills development. This is part of our responsibility in the ERRP. I'm hoping you can see this. This is in a nutshell what we're talking about when we talk about tourism recovery approach. It's got 7 interventions. My eyes are failing me. I'll have to get my gadget because from here I can't see, because it's, I don't know if you can see from where you are sitting. You can't see. Are we able to expand a bit? It's not visible. Because this is the key component of the tourism recovery plan. Okay, I think we must just make sure that everybody gets a printout of that, because I don't want to waste time. But I'll take you through it so that you can understand. We have 7 pillars, or what we call interventions, strategic interventions. We have pillars, so it's 3 pillars. The first one is around protect and rejuvenate supply. The second one is reigniting demand. The third one is strengthening enabling capabilities. The two would be, the first one would largely be what we need to do. Reigniting demand would partner with private sector. Strengthening enabling capabilities. The enablers would be things that needs to happen to support the recovery, but are not necessarily within the portfolio of tourism. So it could be things that needs to be done in the sister departments and other areas, and I'll come to that. The first one, we're talking about what the Department of Tourism have to do, and we've started there. Implementation of norms and standards for safe operation across the value chain to enable safe travel and rebuild traveler confidence. You'd note that this work we've started, these norms and standards that we're talking about, globally they call them biosecurity. Now we're talking about the issue of social distancing. We are making them a permanent feature of what needs to be complied with in terms of the law. So when we go forward, Minister of Tourism does not have to keep on issuing directions that changes, because the feedback from TBCSA and everybody else says, you're causing a lot of confusion to us and you're causing a lot of uncertainty. Just have standard things that we have to comply with, and we know this is what we have to do. So that is what we are putting in place, and the norms and standards themselves as well. Just separate from the broader thing, we consulted, and they were developed as partnership with the private sector. The second area is stimulating demand through domestic demand through targeted initiatives and campaigns. You have seen us since last year, myself, the Deputy Minister, SAT, driving different activities in terms of enabling domestic campaign. The MECs have picked up as well to start driving that. So this is about where we showcase the beauty of the country we've gone. You've seen where we've been to expose the domestic market, to say this is what you can go, what you can do, for how much, where this week the DM together with SAT and the team in KZN were in KZN showcasing Simangaliso, wetlands and the activities of tourism around that area. So this is what we talk about. And I must say, one of the feedback I've received, both in terms of cabinet, in terms of NCCC, but as well the sector, is that we've seen a rise in terms of domestic travel. Many of the sectors, and as well the report that we are receiving, is that some of the facilities actually during Easter were able to call back the workers that they had last called to come to work in February last year. So domestic tourism remains a pillar, and that's why we're saying it will assist to get the sector going while we still have the challenges that we have in terms of our international market. But that necessarily doesn't mean that international market is not important. Both of them have to play a very critical role. But we are saying while we're sorting out the issues of the variant and all those things, and while travelers are not coming, domestic tourism remains critical for us, and it will be for the coming few months as we go on. Execute a global marketing program to reignite international demand. And this we have to do in partnership, because we do acknowledge that, for example, you find business partners who have links, who have partners across the globe that are able to work with, that they are able to talk to, that can help us pass the message in terms of what we are doing in South Africa to manage the pandemic and what is. We've had quite a number of engagement with various stakeholders, embassies. We continue to do that. In the coming weeks, we'll continue as well to talk to targeted source markets to reignite that demand. But also what we are finding more, as I was doing interview with German TV, was that more and more there's misunderstanding about how we manage in the pandemic. As we tell them that we have high recovery rate, everybody is shocked. We say we have low fatality rate, they are shocked. And you start giving them the statistics. And that's what we are picking up, that we need to intensify in terms of that marketing and that communication. And that's what we are doing together with SAT, together with TBCSA. And one of the things that we are saying, through the TOMSA levy, that's what we need to start really pushing in terms of getting that out and getting that domestic international market back. And that's why recently they found that I said, one of the things that I think I need to do now is to start pushing the message through, even if we can't get the bookings today, but at least secure the booking for later this year when we get into our festive season. The third one is launch an investment and resource mobilization program to support the supply side. Part of what we are doing here is that the upgrading and making sure that our attractions remains in the manner that they were when visitors visit, it's important. So infrastructure revitalization, revamping, upgrading of the facilities, ensuring that maintenance happen. We have committed as the Department of Tourism to investing in publicly owned infrastructure, to go, and we've identified them, to go and revamp them and maintain them so that they remain to the level of the standard. But again, in terms of the Tourism Equity Fund, this is where it falls, because we are saying both in terms of igniting demand for those that there's, you know, you don't want properties to close. Tomorrow, somebody was used to this place, it's no longer existing. So we are saying those who are interested to come in as entrepreneurs, let's create an incentive for them to go and become players in the tourism space. And then the fourth one is support for the protection of core tourism infrastructure assets. That's what I talked to. It's linked to the investment and resource mobilization. Number 5, okay, I've read the number 5. Number 6, tourism regional integration. One of the things that we are saying here is that we need to ensure that tourism, when we market South Africa, because there's value for us to market with the region. Region meaning that, for example, if you are to sell, because people don't want to come long distance, risking COVID, to come to a destination, they just see one thing. So we are saying part of what we need to do is package it properly. For example, you can say to somebody, you'll come to Table Mountain and Robben Island, you go to Kruger, you'll go to Tsitsikama, you'll go to, Blade River, but you can also go to Vic Falls and package it as part of the regional integration work. Somebody was talking about road to ocean, for example, which I don't know, many of us know that you literally can move from a land to an ocean through Mozambique, Limpopo, Mozambique. And that's one of the things that we're talking about as part of regional integration in terms of tourism, marketing, and working together. So we do believe that part of what we have to do is to do a regional integration in terms of marketing so that we can be able to sell South Africa better when we package with our regional, with our neighbors, because it will make sense for somebody who has to travel so long distance to come to South Africa and benefit in terms of the countries that they have to visit. The last one is a long-term strategy that you understand that we have already started in terms of the review of the tourism policy to provide enhanced support for sector growth and development in this country. What we have done, we started with the panel has been doing very well, would be in the process to review, and we are aligning that to what the impact and what we have learned, the lessons that we have learned from tourism, from COVID-19 during this time. Now, the enablers of this plan would sit with different departments, and that's why we had to go to cabinet, because we wanted our colleagues to understand that some of the issues and some of the areas, and for us to be able to achieve what we want to achieve, we do need them to support us as the Department of Tourism, and they need to support us as tourism sector. Now, one of the areas that we're talking about is that in terms of enabling environment, first one is with the private sector, that we have to partner between the industry and government so that we can be able to see the vision that we have here, to be able to implement some of these things together, get the feedback together, do joint marketing together. The second area of enablement will be partnership with the relevant department to be able to improve traveler facilitation through implementation. One, the e-visa remains critical. Minister Motsoaledi is working with us, and yesterday we were having even another discussion around that to say this remains a key enabler for us as the tourism sector. Tourism safety remains key for us as well, because it's one of the, if we finish doing everything and tourists come here and still complain about the safety, is going to be an issue. Quick turnaround times in terms of processing licensing for tour operator remains a key enabler. Deployment of the vaccine in the country and the vaccine rollout remains a critical component of the recovery of the tourism sector. Stimulating demand through government consumption expenditure, and this is what we are saying too. To Minister Mmamoloko to say the cutting of travel and conferencing in government is not assisting the recovery of the tourism sector. And we are saying we would want to see those budgets being brought back so that we can start seeing government hosting conferences, government being able to travel again, because if they don't, government as a sector and as one of the contributors, biggest spenders of tourism, will continue to suffer. There are risks in terms of this that we have identified. Reduced airlift capacity, brand positioning is key. Source markets and the easing of cross-border travel restriction remains one of the risks. The country may not be able to achieve its target of population immunity by the end of 2021. We are saying if this is not, remains a risk for us for recovery. So that's why we are saying the rollout of the vaccine, if it's not done timeously, remains a risk for tourism to recover. Domestic travel not picking up in the short to medium term, considering the weak state of the economy and diminishing household disposable income. We're still fortunate we are seeing people spending and would want to see more, but we're saying that the more people loses their jobs, the more people are not able to work, they would not spend. And the stop and start cycle, because it makes it not easy for the sector to be able to plan in terms of their issues. I think I spoke to this in terms of more detail. I'm not going to go into detail in them so that I can. This is where we're talking about. I've talked about the pillars in terms of what we want to do. I've gone in terms of that environment. I just finished this. Now the implementation. The Department of Tourism and SA Tourism shall play a leading role in terms of coordinating and ensuring the implementation of this. Partnership between the public and private sector necessary ingredient for successful implementation. The participation of all social partners in the planning and implementation of all the action is also critical, meaning that we would want even the labor movement within our sector to buy into this. Monitoring and evaluation system of the implementation will generate quarterly reports so that we can be able to manage and see how far we are doing. Just the last slide I want to speak to is greater diversification. This is intended outcomes of this. It's greater diversification of the supply side of the tourism market, increased quantum and focus of infrastructure investment in the tourism sector, protection and creation of jobs in the sector, a recovered sector characterized by greater inclusion. So this we are emphasizing that we do not want a sector that recovers but excludes majority of the people. Greater confidence in South Africa as a safe destination, and improve South African brand, turning domestic tourism into an anchor of the tourism sector, increased international arrivals. We still want to see more numbers coming. So the intended outcomes of this plan, this is what we want to achieve out of it. So that's it from my side. I think I took a bit long, but I thought it's important that we can take you through in detail. We didn't want to release it just like that for you to see a document without proper engaging, without proper context of what we want to achieve, especially in a sector that is a mass employment sector that employs a lot of people, that the barriers of entry are low, is able to bring in old and young people, it's able to bring male and female and communities in the LGBTQ or queer community. It's able to bring, young people finding meaningful role, SMMEs, rural and urban. This is one of the sectors that is able to bring inclusivity, and we thought that it's important that everybody understands what we want to do, what we want to achieve, because we'll depend also in everybody in this country supporting us, both by being travelers, but also by being contributors in the tourism space. Thank you very much. I took long.
Thank you very much.
Of course, we're coming out from the Sandton Convention Center.